Hi. So everybody, this is Konda. Meet Konda.
Hello.
Konda, meet everybody.
Hi,
So
everybody.
there's 20 something of us here in person. You can see
Okay.
the little videos of
Yep.
us. And then there's I don't know, like 15, 12 or so online. So there's 30 something of us. As I shared with you a couple of days ago, this is the teams, the various teams doing our work within the circular economy in Sabah. I'm very, very excited for you to meet them and for them to meet you. So
Wonderful.
Konda is not a stranger to Sabah. She's been here before. She's dived in and went snorkeling in the Sampurna Islands.
That's
She's
right.
driven across Sabah with us, across the landscape. She helped us with the campaign against the coal-fired power plant in Lahadatu many years back, and we won. No coal in Sabah.
No coal in Sabah.
And she's done many things. She's a filmmaker, she's a producer, she's actively engaged in many movements, social justice, racial justice, impact investment. I'm not going to name all these things because you get to talk to her directly and she can speak for herself. We have hopefully about an hour plus with her, and she does not have a presentation because that's not how she rolls.
Right.
She likes to chat. And she just recently moved from California to Louisiana. So California, as you guys know, is West Coast. It's the cool corner of the USA, and she's moved to the South. Why has she moved to the South? I guess she'll tell us about it. Konda, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Can you all hear me okay?
Very loud and clear.
It's loud and clear?
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm good. You know, it's the end of my day. It's 10 o'clock here, 9 o'clock here, or something like that, p.m. in the evening. And so, yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to it.
Tell us about your day, Konda.
My day. You know, when something's done, it's done. I'd have to look at my calendar to even remember what I did. It's always so busy. I think what I did is I'm looking at my calendar, honestly. Oh, I had a really brilliant conversation with a woman named Dara Cooper, who runs an organization called the Black Food and Justice Alliance. And she's just incredible. And so she and I had caught up, which we hadn't done in a while. And yeah, I actually was supposed to get my COVID vaccine today. And I couldn't do it because it's so cold out there that outside here in Louisiana, we're having this incredibly crazy cold snap. It's never this cold. Everything's frozen. The streets are frozen. And no one could really get out on the street. So, because I had to drive to another town. So I missed getting my COVID vaccine today, which was my first one. So that didn't happen. So I just worked all day on my computer and met with my assistant and, you know, things like that. It's been a busy day. Lots of meetings back to back.
So tell us about your journey that led you to Louisiana. So when I met you, you were doing a film called Maya Skies. Is that right? Is that when we met?
Wow, is that when we met? I was doing Maya Skies?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that was a long time ago, Cynthia.
Yep. So tell us about that, and then moving to Impact Hub.
So many years in between. Yeah. Okay. Let me just try to give you a little travelogue quickly. Well, I guess when we met, I was doing this film. I'm a producer, a film producer, and I was producing a digital dome film. I don't know. Are you all familiar with that? How it's a planetarium where the film is the entire sky, the entire roof is the film, and so you kind of look up, and it's the screen is all around you, it's circular. I was producing a film about the Mayan people in parts of Mexico and southern and south of there as well, Belize, Guatemala, where the Mayan, the Mayan people who were just incredible people who created so many things, rich, rich culture. And I produced a film about their cosmology, things that they believed in, the story of the earth of creation and all the many beautiful things that they did and created from a cosmological, astrological point of view. And so I created that film, and that's when we met, which was a long time ago. God, it feels like it was forever. That was in Oakland, California. That got me to Oakland. And I ended up after that starting a company. It was which Cynthia just pointed to. That was called Impact Hub Oakland. And Impact Hub is a sort of like what you guys are doing right there. It reminds me of Impact Hub. It's a co-working space where people would come together. Like if you all were sitting there with your laptops and co-working and good Wi-Fi and a lot of good food and what have you. I created this space in downtown Oakland, and it was this huge space, very big, big building, two buildings that we opened up and put them together. And it became sort of like what, it's like Cynthia, what you do. You bring people together who are connected to a mission of some sort, that are engaged in the kinds of things that make life better, that creates a better world on all kinds of levels. And Impact Hub Oakland became that space in Oakland. So people gathered, we had all kinds of activities and um, evening events and talks and webinars like this. And so I did that for many years. And it was and it still is, except for COVID, right? COVID has shut everything down. So people aren't gathering. The space is unavailable, unfortunately, and has been for a year now. So that's hard. But anyway, so we created that space. And then after that, I left there before COVID. I left and I passed it over to the next person. I'm more of someone who likes to start things and then pass them on to the next person to keep running it. And I moved into what I'm doing now, which I didn't know this is what I was doing when I left the hub. When I left running the hub, I was the CEO of the hub and the co-founder. I started another company. I'm a serial entrepreneur, something that she didn't say. I started another company with a couple of other people who also left their companies. And we started something that we were calling Jubilee Partners. And the idea in general, we were trying to figure out what we were doing, but the idea was reimagining capitalism and moving resources and money from where it is aggregated right now to where it needs to go. So we know that we needed to do something around capital, around resources, around leveling the playing field. And that is what we wanted to do. Because I don't know if you all know, the US has this reputation of being this amazing place. And yes, and the kinds of inequities and inequalities that exist in the United States, it's horrendous. For Black and brown people, for indigenous people, the kinds of racism and oppression that exists today and every day. You all saw it. I know you saw the George Floyd murder. I assume you all saw that. It was worldwide. Did you all see that, Cynthia? People, can you shake your heads or not? The police
Yes, we did.
officer, you saw that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you that was, you know, for a lot of people that was stunning. That was like, I can't believe that happened. You know, in our world, it happens all the time in this country. I think that George Floyd, you know, for me, it was just another black man being murdered by a cop in America. However, I think what happened, why it had the impact that it had, is because we were all so slowed down from COVID. You know, COVID was intense then, and the whole world was slowed down. We were all at home. We were all rooting for life, right? Like we were afraid of, you know, all the deaths that was happening, and rooting for people who were all the frontline nurses and doctors who were helping to save people's lives. I think that life had a sense of intimacy, and we were all very tender at that point in time because of COVID, and the whole world was, I think. So to see a man's life taken when everybody was doing everything to save their own lives and their families' lives, and sheltering in place was very intense then. To see that happen, I think really was hard for everybody. And it impacted the world in a way that I've never seen before. That impact has been extremely, it's just been huge worldwide. And but the truth is that that's what it's like to be black in America. You know, that is one of the ways, that is one of the things that happens often, way too frequently. So when I left the hub and I wanted to do something that was going to make life um, for people who were more disenfranchised, those who are marginalized in our society, which is based on race in America, um, I knew that it was going in some direction. I didn't know exactly what. So as I started doing this company with my friends called Jubilee Partners, I realized that I needed to spin off from what we were doing, because I was more interested in really working specifically with Black folks and our situation in America. My partners were white. They were more interested in the big general picture, and I needed to spin off, so I did. And I created something called Jubilee Justice. And Jubilee Justice is a nonprofit, my first nonprofit. I work a lot for nonprofits. I'm on the board for nonprofits, but I've never had a nonprofit in my life. I've never done that. So I started a nonprofit called Jubilee Justice. And what I was doing, I started out with something that we called journeys, these Jubilee Justice journeys, where people would gather. I convened spaces where we would talk and it would be very wealthy people and with financial wealth, and then other people with wisdom, the wealth of wisdom. We bring people together and have conversations at the intersection. We would talk about land, race, money, and spirit. Land, race, money, and spirit. That's the conversations that we were having. Land, race, and money, I believe, are the core issues in America. The stolen land from indigenous people that has happened here, and the complete, and then of course, all based on race and all about money. And so we would have these conversations, and we had them. I came to Louisiana, to where I currently live. Never did I think I'd be living here. But a friend of mine owned a plantation, an ex-plantation where hundreds and hundreds of slaves, enslaved Black people, African people, were here. It was a cotton plantation, the typical thing that you hopefully maybe have read about in America. My friend's family bought this land in 1927. And they're a white family that bought this land in 1927, 3,600 acres. I don't know if you all do acres but it's a lot of land, 3,600 acres. Her family bought this land in 1927. So it was post-slavery, but still the impact of the ability to buy this kind of land, the ability to have the finances to buy this kind of land, this amount of land, it still goes back and is based on the slave economy. Because the economy in America being the biggest economy in the world, so to speak, based on the fact of hundreds and hundreds of years of African people being enslaved, free labor, millions of hours of free labor that allowed and created the biggest economy in the world based on enslaved people and the stolen land from indigenous people. That is how America has become the world power. People would like to think that it was from their hard work. And yes, people work hard, but if you go back far enough, you'll see that's the roots of what happened here in this country. So it was fitting for us to have this conversation about land, race, money, and spirit on a plantation where all the harm in this country happened, because that also is the place where I believe healing needed to happen, is in the South of this country. Now, I, as an African-American woman, had never spent any time in the South, mainly for all those reasons. For the history reasons, I had my family's from here, my mother was from the South, my father's from the South. I have, their histories. There's lots of stories there. How they got out of the South, why they left the South, leaving in the middle of the night, because, for many reasons of the kinds of horrific things that happened to Black folks, my grandparents. And so I knew that as comfortable as I have been living in California, and like Cynthia says, as cool as it is to live in California, the work that I've done has always been in urban America, right? In cities and towns. And I knew that it was time for me to do my work actually in rural, in the country, in the South, where the harm happened in this country. And so I found my way to Louisiana. I ended up doing my several of these, what we call journeys. There are these gatherings of 3-4 days together across race, cross culture, with spirit in the middle of it. And I say spirit, what I mean by that is that I believe that we would come together, facilitate it with love, basically, knowing that our destinies and our liberation is tied together. That we are in this boat together, and that the only way we're going to get out of it is together, and to transcend the harm that has happened here in this country. And so we would have these intense transformational conversations, being together for day and night, and it was really, they were very impactful. Because again, I guess it goes back to me believing that in order to really make transformation of any system, because this is a systemic problem, we need systemic solutions. And in order to do that, the best way, the most effective way to make real transformation is to change the mindset that created the system. And so our work on these journeys and these conversations was talking to people to change hearts and minds about how they are living in this country with masses of wealth, where it really came from, and how to redistribute it. So I really believe in the redistribution of wealth. And as a matter of fact, the name Jubilee came from, the Jubilee has several meanings. One of them is that in the Torah, it says that everybody, I think you may know a sabbatical, right? A sabbatical is every 7 years, it says you're supposed to take a break. You're supposed to just stop and take a year off, do nothing, dance, play the guitar, whatever it is you want to do, right? The land should be fallow for that 7th year. And so every 7 years, that's what you do. Every 7 years, so every 49 years, you actually have a jubilee. And a jubilee means that not only do you stop, but you also redistribute land and wealth. And that is what a jubilee is. And so the name of my organization is called Jubilee Justice, and is based on the notion of redistributing land and wealth. So what happened is that I was doing these journeys, and out of that and some other incredible things that always happen in life, right? Synchronicities. I ended up realizing that I really wanted to work with Black farmers. And one of the things that happened is that a friend of mine owns a company by the name of Lotus Foods. Lotus Foods sells rice, organic rice products like rice pastas and rice crackers and things like that. And they're a beautiful company, a really wonderful company, and a couple by the name of Carol and Ken. They own that company, and I know them. They're friends of mine in the Bay Area. They live in the Bay Area. And so I ran into Carol during this time that I'm having these conversations. I want to work with Black farmers, and I run into her at a conference in New York. And we sat down and had lunch, and I said to Carol, tell me more about your company and the rice, because I knew there was something special about the rice that she used. And so she started telling me about the system of rice intensification, SRI. And I was like, wow. And she told me about, the benefits of that SRI has on climate change, obviously, on the planet, in terms of the water, less water use, as you all know. Also, the microbes that are in the water that off-gas methane, is diminished, and that the equation for a farmer is that it's less input and more output. And so, how the farmers were benefiting as well, and that they were going into different villages and teaching farmers how to grow SRI rice. And, farmers who were barely making it, subsistence farmers who then had a market, who were starting to thrive because of it. And so I'm listening to her story, and she's telling about SRI rice, and I'm going, wow, this sounds amazing. And then she said, and this is the part that changed my life, she said, me and Ken, her and her husband, their new strategy is to actually create a domestic supply chain of rice in the US, because they were getting all their rice from different Asian countries, China and Vietnam and different places they were getting the rice from. And so she said they wanted a supply chain in the US, in addition to what they were already doing, because they're just growing so big. And I said to her, well, what about Black farmers? What if Black farmers became your supply chain in the US, who learned how to grow SRI rice? And she loved that idea. And I thought that would be amazing because I also think of SRI rice as rice is the biggest commodity grown on the planet, right? All over. I mean, it's like what billions and billions of people eat every day. And the amount of rice that is grown in the traditional way of growing rice is creating a lot of havoc on the planet in terms of climate and the methane gas that it's off-gassing and the water use. And so it's the future, I think, of growing, just like, getting off of fossil fuels is something that we have to do. I think that we have to change the way that we grow rice. And so for Black farmers here in the US to be in the forefront of a future movement when typically they've been in the back of everything else, I thought, wouldn't this be amazing? Because nobody is really growing SRI rice here in this country. There's a couple of individuals, but there's no because we're big ag, right? And so the next thing I knew, I was on a Zoom call like this with Carol and her husband Ken and the people at Cornell University who are here in the United States, who are the people who have been teaching and providing technical assistance to farmers all over the world to learn how to grow SRI. And so I ended up in a Zoom call with them and my company, and the next thing I know, I formed Jubilee Justice to hold this project and to teach Black farmers in America and in the South how to grow SRI rice. So I was already here a lot in Louisiana doing my journeys, but going back home to Oakland, all the time living in Oakland. But then when I got to meet the farmers that I started working with, they were here in Louisiana, in Mississippi. And so I came here, and this was right during COVID. And I just decided to just move. And so I didn't, no, I didn't. That's not true. I didn't decide to move. I ended up moving. I decided to take a trip here. I had no idea I was going to stay here. I left in August of last year, and I just haven't been back home. I kind of moved by default. And so now I live here on that same plantation that I had my journeys on, which I mean, Konda Mason is living on a plantation. It's like, who'd have thunk, right? So here I am living on this ex-plantation. My company is based here, where we've got acres here where we're trying out the SRI. We just did our first year. We have now 10 farmers that are in Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina. Last year we did, it was a mixed year, Some of it went really well, some of it not so well. We had some disease, we had a hurricane, we had so many things, and it was a mixed bag. But overall, we've dug in, and we believe that where it went well, it went really well. And so I'm building a rice mill right now. And so I started this nonprofit, I raised money, I bought a rice mill that is being put together. And the rice mill, what I'm doing is creating a co-op so that all of the farmers who are part of the project, they are a cooperative, and they will own the rice mill. And so that they then participate not only in the upside of growing SRI rice and its abundance, but they will also participate in the financial upside of owning a rice mill. And so, and then we have an automatic buyer, Lotus Foods. So they're just waiting for the rice. So we've got, and it's all specialty rice. We have different varieties. Some of them went well, some of them didn't. And we're figuring out, as a matter of fact, this week, we're finishing our report on the data. We did a lot of data from last year, to see what worked, what didn't work. And I will have a final report this week. And we have a meeting with Lotus Foods this week where we will share our data and show them what happened. And I'd be happy to share that with you all. So I'll send it to you, Cynthia. And essentially, that's where we are. So we're now in our second season. Everybody's preparing their fields right now to grow rice. And like I said, now we started with 3 farmers, and now we have 10. And it's just going to keep growing and growing is my hope. And I'm going to open up another mill in South Carolina. So I'm buying a mill also in South Carolina because it's too far from Louisiana. So it looks like what's going to happen is that there will probably be several mills, and the co-op will be an umbrella cooperative that all the farmers who are part of the project, so that they own it, they own the means of production, and that way they will actually hopefully really have participate financially in a way that will be really good for their bottom line. So, and good for the planet. And so that's what I'm doing now. So I'm living in Louisiana and enjoying this new project called Jubilee Justice. That was a long way of saying that's how I got to Louisiana.
So tell us a little bit about the intersection between rice land ownership, the sort of being part of the financial system, how the financial system marginalized Black farmers in the past, and how with what you're doing, you're also aiming to make an intervention there. So land ownership, and then and the financial system.
Yeah, boy, thank you for asking that question. You know, we got to do a little history here. In the 1920s, after the failure of Reconstruction and Jim Crow before the intense amount of Jim Crow. So Jim Crow, after what happened after the end of slavery, is that there was a promise that was going to happen, that Black folks who were formerly enslaved were going to get, each family was going to get 40 acres and a mule, 40 acres of land and a mule that would set them off to do their thing, to be able to survive. Well, that is what was promised. And then the president that came in, his name was Jackson, he didn't do it. It was a lie. It didn't happen. And so even in spite of that not happening, Black people ended up amassing land anyway, collectively buying land together, really working hard to be able to live. And so by the 1920s, 1910, 1920s, there was about 20 million acres of land owned by Black people who were formerly enslaved. 20 million acres was owned by that many people, by Black people. And they were farming, right? And so Jim Crow is a system of oppression and terrorism that happened to Black folks in America. As Black people got emancipated from slavery and started getting on their feet, white Southern culture was the backlash of that, is what is called Jim Crow. Jim Crow, it was a time when it was actually sanctioned by laws, and there was no protection for Black people, and they were murdered, they were terrorized, they were hung. Everything that you can think of was treated and like deep racism and oppression, taking families, tearing them apart. It was horrible. And it's called Jim Crow, that period of time. So those laws, what they did is that 200 million acres started to diminish. And because of all the terror that happened, a lot of Black folks left the South, moved to the north of our country. It's called the Great Migration. And they left and they moved north out of getting away from the terrorism and the lynching that took place. And as they were just brutalizing Black folks, okay? So people got run off their land, and all kinds of shenanigans happened to take Black folks' land, because basically they felt like they shouldn't own land. So we went from 200 million acres to today we have less than 2 million acres, from 200 million down to 2 million, and less than that. We had 1 million farmers on that 20 million acres. We are down to between 25 and 30,000 Black farmers in all of America, from 1 million. And that is what it is today. 30,000 acres of farmland is being confiscated every year from Black folk, okay? And the way that happens is through a lot of what I call collusion between our government. Our government, we have the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. The USDA gives farmers loans in order for them to, before they plant every year, they give them a loan, and they apply for a loan, they give them a loan, they take that money, they buy all their inputs and everything they need to plant, and then they pay it back when they harvest, and this is kind of a cycle. What they do with Black farmers, intentionally so we know that in our country, you start to plant in the spring, which is like March, beginning around March and April and May at the latest is when you start to plant. We harvest at the end of the summer. What happens is that people who were applying for these grants as Black, well, if you're a white farmer, you'd get your grant. Black farmers, they would wait until past planting season. So let's say if you needed to plant in March and you don't have that loan, you can't plant until they give it to you, and they give it to you in June. Now, if they give it to you in June, that's around the time you should be harvesting. And they don't give you the whole amount. They only give you a part of what you've asked for, and they give it to you too late. So now you've got the money, and you're trying to catch up. You're planting, even though it's out of season. So you get into this rotation off season. Now, meanwhile, in order to get the loan, they collateralize. That means they collateralize your farm and your home, meaning that your home and your farm are the collateral that they use up against, so that if you default on your loan, they take your farm and they take your house. With Black farmers, the USDA, our US government, remind you, would over collateralize Black farmers by 5 times the amount that they collateralize white farmers. So what that meant is that you get the loan late, it's past planting season, you're going to get off season, then, so now you're in this rotation. The weather is against you, everything is against you, and your farm, the plants can't work in off season, and you end up defaulting because you can't pay it back. They know you can't pay it back. They've set it up this way. And then the next thing you know, because your house and your farm are being hawked against, are collateralized against the loan, you default, they take it. They take your farm. They take your house. That is what has been happening over and over and over again to just thousands and thousands of Black farmers over the years. There is a lawsuit that happened called the Pickford lawsuit, where it was a class action lawsuit that Black folks came together and they sued the US Department of Agriculture, the USDA. It lasted for a couple of decades. They won. Black folks won. It was the biggest civil rights lawsuit in the history of this country. They won $2 billion that had to spread across thousands and thousands of farmers. It sounds like a win, but it really wasn't. Because what happened as a part of the Pickford suit is that they were supposed to, as well as give people money, they ended up giving every farmer $50,000. Meanwhile, the kinds of debt that they had with the USDA over all these years, right? The kind of debt that they had was way bigger than $50,000. And a part of the Pickford suit was that they were not only supposed to get money, but they were also supposed to cancel their debt. That didn't happen. They didn't cancel the debt. So because they didn't cancel the debt, that $50,000 did very little to these farmers. You need more than that just for a season. So they call themselves making good to Black farmers, which really didn't. So ever since Pickford suit, which was, it started in the 1990s. It finally paid off, I think, in 2005. People have been working to get this debt canceled. When Mr. Trump came in, he there was a commission that was, he just killed everything that had anything to do with helping Black farmers, okay? So now with the Biden administration, and your friend Cory Booker has 2 acts that are happening, and it's going to finally happen. I've been in conversations all week, all last week and this week. There's the Justice for Black Farmers Act that Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, and a couple of other people that are part of that you may not know. And there's another one that is preceding that, that is a COVID relief bill that it looks like it absolutely is going to happen. The Biden administration, and they're canceling debt in that. So that could happen any day now, that all this debt that has been accumulated by Black farmers is finally going to be canceled. And so it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's finally happening. And so, so it's an exciting time. The Biden administration is actually, a lot is moving in the ag department. And so, but what we're doing as Jubilee Justice, what we have been doing, in addition to Jubilee Justice, which is teaching the SRI rice and SCI, which is system of crop intensification, because for rotation crops, what we have, I started another nonprofit that is a fund that is called Pot Liquor Capital. Now let me tell you something about pot liquor. The name pot liquor, y'all don't know what it is, right? Okay, I'll tell you what pot liquor is. When you cook a mess of greens, what we call a mess of greens, when you cook a pot of greens, okay, collard greens, Black folks really eat a lot of collard greens and mustard greens. It's our food, right? I grew up on that. So you cook a pot of greens, and in that pot of greens, at the bottom is the juice, the water that's greenish brown from the and all the nutrients from the greens end up in that water. And that water, that juice is called pot liquor. So as a kid, your mom would say, they take the juice off the greens and you drink it because it makes your bones strong, and you get, it's like all these things. It's like, it's the thing that, and then you dunk your cornbread in it. Well, hold on. So there are 2 theories about pot liquor. This is a very serious conversation we're about to have here. There are dunkers, people who take their cornbread and they dunk it, okay? And then there are those who actually crumble it into the pot liquor. Now, I am a dunker, all right? Crumbling it, I don't get it, but then there are the crumblers who don't get why you dunk it. They want their cornbread in it and but see, I still like my cornbread crisp. So when you dunk it, it's wet on one end, but crisp on the other. You know what I'm saying? I'm a dunker. So anyway, back to pot liquor.
Lots of laughter.
I name my company Pot Liquor Capital because pot liquor is what makes everything strong. It builds strength. And so I thought, what an apt name to call it pot liquor, because what we want to do is what we call reparative capital. We are raising funds right now and capital that we will deploy to farmers, to Black farmers, and help them in various ways, with 0 to 3 to 1 or 2% loans, grant capital, really repairing the harm that these other institutions have done. So not only the USDA, but private banks too. When Black farmers have gone to banks to get loans, same thing, give it to them late, give them little, not as much as they need, take their land, collateralize their land and take it. So that is what's been happening. And so what we need are new institutions that don't cause harm, that actually start to heal. And so Pot Liquor Capital and Jubilee Justice, they're two nonprofits. Pot Liquor Capital is what is called a supporting organization to Jubilee Justice. And so our farmers will also have capital as they need. And so we're refinancing their loans. They have super high interest loans that are ridiculous. And so we are able to refinance that. We're able to give them capital, give them the money they need at the right time, the right amount that they need. And we're about to give our first capital out right now. Some of it is a loan, some of it is a grant, and that's what we're doing. And so we are trying to intervene where all the harm that took place. So with the cancellation of this debt, this is huge it's huge, but that's people who have debt from the USDA. There is still the bank debt. So some farmers have debt from both places. And so the bank debt has not been canceled. So there's still a lot of work to be done to get them under these onerous kinds of financial situations that they're in. And so that's what we're trying to do, is create new institutions and intervene where this harm has taken place. And so we're in touch with the lawyers who have created the bill, the Justice for Black Farmers bill. They're friends of ours, and they know the farmers. They've been working on this Pickford case to get this debt canceled for a decade or more. And so they know the farmers, and they will be able to help us know the farmers that still have debt on their books from the banks, and we will then work with them to help get them from underneath that debt. Is that clear?
Wow. I think everyone's digesting it over here, and I'm sure online as well. I'm very interested to know more about this bill and how the bill came about, and the kind of connection between the realities on the ground, and how did people like Cory Booker know that this was a core issue. And maybe you should say who Cory Booker is.
Oh, Cory Booker, he ran for president on the Democratic ticket. He didn't make it, obviously. Cory Booker was a senator from New Jersey, and Black man who is a vegan and is someone who is very progressive and a beautiful soul. So he, Cory ended up in a seat in the ag department, in terms of he's on the ag committee in the Senate. And the plight of Black farmers is well known. It's no secret. It's absolutely no secret. It just has persisted because there's never been the will to change it. But there's lots of people on the ground who have been working furiously hard for years, decades, to make these changes. And so I'm not sure of the history, but I know my friend Tracy, who is a part of authoring the bill. And they got, during the time also when Elizabeth Warren was running for president, Cory Booker was running for president, they all contacted different organizations here on the ground, nonprofits who have been working with Black farmers, to try to help them with their what they were going to do if they were president around agriculture. Like, they hired a lot of people who are friends of mine. As a matter of fact, one of them works with me, a woman named Jillian. They hired them to kind of help them create a platform on agriculture and what they should do. During that period of time, they met all these badass ag people who are on the ground here, who are nonprofits, and really found out the truth of what's happening in agriculture with Black farmers. And I believe, even though they didn't make it as president, they found out, they started talking to all these people on the ground. And from that, I think the swell came together. Both of them didn't make it for president, but Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren came together and created this and co-authored this bill.
You mentioned 10 farmers, going from 3 farmers to 10 farmers. What is the sort of average land area of these farmers? I mean, what
The average in America, black farmer has about 100 acres. And that's small here. I would say we have a couple with big, we have one that has, let's see, I would say the average is probably about 100 acres. We have a couple that have, that are big farmers. We have two that have, one that has 1,000 acres. But he's, that's very unusual. But I would say probably the average is about 100. Take him out because he skews it. We are looking at probably average about 100 acres is what people have. A lot of them are around 30, 40 acres. Others, like 300 acres, 200 acres, things like that. And they're in
So tell us
Louisiana.
more about the.
Mhm.
Tell us more about the community-owned mill that you're envisioning and building.
I'm very excited about that. I'm in the throes right now of creating the co-op. As a matter of fact, this weekend I spent lots of time this weekend bringing that together. Essentially, so this is how that started. I didn't know I was going to do any of this. It all just started to emerge. And I certainly didn't think I was going to be buying a rice mill. Well, what happened is that Mr. Sanders, who is the farmer that I told you that has 1,000 acres, he's in Mississippi. Mr. Sanders is an older gentleman. He and his son run the farm. He's a rice farmer, and he has other commodities as well. But one of them is rice. He has 250 acres of rice that he grows every year in the traditional way. Okay, traditional rice with all the chemicals and everything. Mr. Sanders put all the energy into growing the rice. He then grows it, he harvests it, he puts it in these big silos. The next person comes, picks up his rice, and mills it, cleans it, and mills it, and then sells it for, he buys it from Mr. Sanders for 13 cents a pound. Okay? He buys it for 13 cents a pound. And then he sells it for about 80 cents a pound. Now, when I heard Mr. Sanders tell me that, I was like, what? You sell it for 13 cents, you do all the work, and he buys it for 13 and he sells. What's wrong with that equation? I said, you know what? Because that's where they are off, the third party. So we decided from that, that's what got me saying, actually, Jubilee Justice, the nonprofit, we're going to gift it as an asset to the cooperative that I'm forming right now. Jubilee Justice will be just a member of the cooperative, and they will participate now from getting, so Mr. Sanders will go from 13 cents a pound to organic. Now, not that 250 acres. Right now, we're just doing little plot of land and he's trying to go up to 5 acre problem, to organic, to what we call regenerative, because what we're doing is soil. We're really focusing on soil and healthy soil. And he will also be an owner of the co-op. So his bottom line will increase dramatically. And that's what I like to see. It's like, so we can run a mill. What's it take? You just got to have money to buy it. And I've raised the money to do that. And and then you find somebody to run it, and we'll figure it out. But we'll run the mill now and cut out that middleman who's taking all the money. So that's why we're doing it. And you know, I've never done this before, but we'll figure it out.
I'm really interested in how it is you connected the dots, and it sounds like it wasn't necessarily, there wasn't a blueprint for how you did this. It just kind of organically, excuse the pun, grew, where you did connect the dots between the practice, the academia, the financing, the law, etc. Is that right?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. I mean, when you think systematically, and it's systems thinking, you look at the entire system and you see that where the intervention needs to happen. You first see where the harm is from a systems point of view, and then figure out, okay, what's mine to do? Where do I want to intervene in the system? And so we're intervening in the things that farmers do. They grow food. And so we're intervening so that those small plots of land that they have can actually, with SRI, you know, you can grow more on smaller plots of land. So we wanted to maximize their land and maximize their bottom line in the food that they grow. And climate, of course, you know, and regenerative agriculture is really, really important to us. And that we're soil is life, and that we are getting back to soil and soil being healthy, because in this country, our soil is dead, and it is the biggest contributor to climate. You know, as we release all the carbon from the soil, we need to be capturing that carbon into the soil. And so that was an important aspect. And so working with SRI allowed us to do both those things. And then there was the money part. Okay, so here is a system where, okay, we intervene on the food side, on the growing food side, and now they also need capital. Even if we just did the SRI, that's still not enough. That's not enough. And so it's like, okay, got to start another nonprofit, and we got to raise money and get a fund, and we got to do that. And so that's what we did, and that's what we're doing. Then it's like, oh shoot, we need a rice mill. We can't give money and then it goes over and this person gets all the money. Okay, we need a rice mill. So it has been, you know, and that's what we're doing. We're just going with what is, you know, still is moving. And but one of the things that we're doing is we're creating what we're calling communities of practice by the farmers. We're bringing the farmers together to get to talk to each other, to learn from each other as we teach them SRI. And so that, because here people are very separated and competitive and nobody talks to the other one. And so we're trying to stop that. And that is also a way of that helps to diminish people, is by separating them from each other and keeping them as competitors instead of collaborators. And so creating the co-op is going to create collaboration. And we also are choosing our farmers in areas where they are close to each other, little kind of pods, so that they can, you know, talk and get to know each other and share best practices. And so we're looking at that community, that social capital is just as important as well as the financial capital. And so those are the things that we're doing. And it's just showing itself to us what we need to do, honestly. We didn't have a plan. Still don't.